Hello, and welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm CJ,
And I'm Chip.
and we're going to present you another show again loaded with information and ready to hit the streets running. As a programming note, Spindle City Straight Talk will now be airing twice a week on Channel 95 on Mondays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. So please be sure to tune in for both of our shows. It's very interesting today. As I went to the South End Neighborhood Association meeting yesterday, and I was actually given a few moments to talk about Spindle City Straight Talk, the Richard Urban Show, Neighborhood News, programs that are all produced or associatedly produced by Troy City Productions, which produces Spindle City Straight Talk. So we're getting popular out there, and it's very interesting to see how this show is being received by the community at large, as everyone at the meeting last night knew of Spindle City Straight Talk and had questions and tips to give us that we are going to be following up on. But right now, I'm going to turn this over to Chip because he came from an important meeting of the insurance committees, and I want to know what's going on with that.
Well, I wish I could give you a really good answer, but as usual, a meeting that was supposed to be a real meeting turned into an informational meeting. It seems that that's the new trend in Fall River. We had an informational meeting on the casino. We've had informational meetings on the landfill, and now we have an informational meeting on the change to the GIC. So basically, what it was a kind of a rehash of the figures that City Administrator Kathy Anaveris has presented, and how the city feels that they're going to save money by switching to the GIC in order to balance the deficit that the city has incurred for the next fiscal year. Unfortunately, the problem is that it's going to be balanced because of tax increases and shifting the cost of health care over to the city employees, both active and retired. So again, government balancing the budget on the backs of the people rather than running an efficient and effective government.
Well, a couple of things that I know were missed by the retirees, but were not missed by the administration, is that just about all of our retirees are receiving Medicare, the federal health insurance plan, which they have to pay for every month, and they get billed quarterly. And it's about $109 or $114 a month on top of the money they're going to have to pay for the GIC plan. Was that taken into consideration for anyone?
No, obviously the city only cares about what its share is in the GIC, because they don't recognize the fact that for most of the retirees who are Medicare eligible, they don't have an option. It is statutorily required. If you are eligible for Medicare, you have to immediately transfer into Medicare. And when you do that, basically about 80% of your health care is paid for by the federal government. So the city is relieved of the majority of the health care burden, yet with this change to the GIC, they're going to impose the greatest changes in the prescription drugs on the retirees. So it's infuriating, and I have made some calls to our congressmen and to our senators, and as the PEC rep, I am exploring the possibility of filing a federal complaint against the city of Fall River.
You know, it's a shame that it seems always has to come to litigation and complaints to get anything accomplished in this city. But I did get to speak to one of our 3 state representatives. And I spoke to Alan Sylvia last night about what is his consideration or his concerns about the GIC. Does he support it or does he not support it? And he came out and he said that he didn't support switching the health plan over to the GIC health plan. He was kicked off of the city health plan and the retirement plan because he took a job as a state representative. Now, when he took a job as a state representative, he was then put into the GIC plan. Now, I mistakenly thought that GIC plan was thrown in as a perk that they didn't have to pay for. And I found out yesterday that, oh no, that perk was done away with. They have to pay for it. And he said the health plan is a wonderful health plan as long as you don't get sick.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the primary problems with the healthcare plan. And as I said, there's a lot of misrepresentation. In fact, the city continues to try to portray this by emphasizing how much money they are saving. They fail to say that we're not saving money because we've negotiated lower cost healthcare. It's because they have the people paying the bills rather than the city paying the share. So it's a cost shift, and the shift is unfair, especially to families, young families with 2 or 3 kids, with the huge deductibles and co-pays in this new plan. If you've got you're a young guy, you just started working, and you're not making a lot of money, you're not at the top wage scale, and you've got a couple kids, and you know, kids get sick a lot, they get hurt a lot, they get hurt playing Little League ball, they get hurt falling off swings and playing in the backyard, and every time you have to run to the emergency room, you're going to get hit with a gigantic copay. Right now it's $50 for an emergency room visit if you're not admitted for them, and now it will be $350 for the first 3 visits. So that's a pretty substantial increase when you think about it. And if if your daughter gets hurt this week, and it's $350. If your son gets hurt next week, it's $350. And if you get hurt the following week, it's another $350. Where before it would be $150 total. So. And of course, the retirees face the higher costs and deductibles, and especially in the prescription drugs. And we all know that retirees use drugs more than everybody else. Legal drugs, I'm going to, for the most part anyway. The fact is that most of them have a shopping cart full of them. And so, again, it's doing what government does best, and that's making the taxpayers pay for their basically inability to run a streamlined government.
You know, it's really interesting because just about every healthcare plan out there has what they call a Medicare Plus or a Medicare Advantage program or something along that line, where you can have your Medicare and you can pay to have, Blue Cross Blue Shield Senior or whatever it may be called, to supplement. It's a supplemental health insurance plan. So they pay those co-pays and whatnot that you may get from Medicare. And I would think that the city would try to negotiate that with GIC so that such a plan existed for the retirees to help them a little bit with their costs. But obviously, I don't see that happening.
No, obviously, the entire the point of the GIC was to create a healthcare system that shifted the cost more to the employees. And the reality is they really don't care, because the fact is that prescription drugs is normally the highest ticket item. If you look at what's spent most, some people get sick, some people are actually at the meeting today, someone referred to them as frequent flyers. People get sick a lot or have issues, but realistically, if you look at the plan in its totality, you find that prescription drugs is always one of the highest cost items in the plans. So they know people use drugs, and so they're not going to give you a break on the drug, because that means they're going to get less money. So it gets down to what we always say: it's all about money. And then when we talk about drugs, it gets me off on a tangent, because I think about how in the United States, we pay more for drugs that are manufactured in the United States than they do any other place in the world. You can buy your drugs from Australia or England or Canada and get your drugs for 1/3 the price that you pay here, because of, again, the money that the pharmaceutical companies pay the politicians.
Of course. And it's really interesting, too, because if you look at the Medicare plans, what's known as Medicare Part D, Medicare Part D covers your drug coverage, hence Part D. And people don't know a lot about the Medicare plans. There's an A, B, C, and D. C is actually the addition of B and D being together to create C. But the average plan from Medicare for drug coverage alone only runs between $19 and $64.99 a month, depending on what plan you want and what tier of coverage. So you select the type of tier of coverage you want. And then also, a lot of our seniors can qualify for something called extra help. And what that means is the caps change. That donut hole that they talk about all the time disappears. Maybe our retirees would do better to say, hey, you keep your GIC health plan. I've got Medicare. I'm going to get Medicare Part D now. And I'll at least have better coverage, because I believe on the Part D coverage, they're paying $2.35 for a generic drug and $6.35 for the high end or the name brand drugs. And that's not a bad plan,
No, but as usual,
but that costs money.
well, the other problem is that as usual, they always find loopholes that are positive for themselves, like when they get fired, they're not considered as fired, they're displaced, and they have all kinds of loopholes. They don't have to pay state tax, and they get per diem for driving more than a mile and a half to work. And but when it comes to the people who actually pay the taxes and pay the bills, they don't have these positive loopholes. They have negatives. See, I already broached the subject of saying, allowing someone to opt out of the drug portion of the plan, because Medicare only covers 80%. So you've got the other 20. So the supplemental plan basically picks up most of the other 20%, which can be a very large figure. Anybody that sees the cost of hospitalizations today. So you need that supplemental plan. But we tried to say, well, let us pay a lower premium, and we'll opt out of the drugs, and we'll get some other drug plan, and the state prohibits that.
Amazing, isn't
So
it?
they can say, well, wait, you know what they tell you? They'd say, yeah, you can do that, but you still have to pay the full premium like you've got a drug plan. And then you can go out and take more money out of your pocket to get in another drug plan.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, you would think that the state would say, you know what, we're going to save money because we don't have to provide them the drug coverage. Let them pay for their drug coverage from the federal government, and they'll be fine. And they, and deduct a certain percentage. You don't have drug coverage, which by their own statements and by the facts that are available for all drug companies to see, drug coverage is one of the most expensive components of it. So you would say, well, you know what, we're not going to get hit with $30,000 or $40,000 a year in drugs and et cetera. So you know what, let's give them a break on that price, and you have to opt out immediately, and you'll get your drug coverage from Medicare Part D. And again, with Medicare Part D, they may actually qualify for what's called extra help. And if their income is low enough, they don't have to pay for the drug coverage at all. If it's, quasi, they'll have to pay a percentage of it. So, at least the federal government sees that. I mean, obviously our state just has blinders on. It's amazing.
Well, because unfortunately, the state can't deficit spend, and neither can the city, although we do, and we know that, on paper we don't deficit spend, but we actually do. But that's one of the problems. The problem is the federal government will realize this, but the state, as you said, it's all about the money. The state's always in trouble, and, we have to have our priorities straight. It's far more important to put lights on a Braga Bridge than it is to worry about people who are 80 and 90 being able to afford their drugs. So, I mean, we have to get our house in order here. And, having lights, a well-lit Braga Bridge is going to do a heck of a lot for people.
Yeah, I mean, a rainbow bridge over the Taunton River, it's going to, generate millions of tourists to come here, just like our carousel did.
And it's reopening.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yep, for all you folks out there that haven't noticed our new shirts with our Spindle City logo, these are our new professional shirts. This is the whole key. The key is that we have this convoluted perspective of what we have to do to help Fall River, and lights, maybe we can put a sign on the Braga Bridge. You're not in Kansas, Toto. You're in Fall River.
Very interesting. I know there was a little bit of rumor and discussion about the fire department over the past couple of days, to the point that I guess negotiations are held at a out-of-state restaurant.
Well, yeah, from what I've been told from reliable sources.
Can't confirm all of it,
Can't
though.
confirm them, but
Okay.
from fairly reliable sources, The meeting was held in East Providence, right over the line from Seekonk, which is, of course, really generating some business for our local restaurants.
Yeah.
It's nice that the mayor decided to meet in East Providence, probably closer to his other apartment. But the meeting was held, and supposedly they came to some kind of agreement, a tentative agreement. From what I've been told, it was brought before the body. It was a pretty lively meeting, I've been told. There were some people who were not happy with the ultimate resolution or suggested resolution, and they are going to vote on the issue, I believe. And in my conversation this morning with a member of the union, and they said that they're really not sure how the vote will go, because there are being some concessions made that maybe they're not comfortable with. I have not been privy to what the concessions are, but I have been told that the mayor was going to move off 153 and, make some pseudo guarantees. And so this is another story that we'll have our finger on. And as soon as we get the specifics, we will give them to you.
It's interesting because there are certain things that the unions can force negotiations on, and there are certain things they can't. Now, if the mayor promises that we're going to have 200 firefighters, or 185 or 190 or whatever number he promises, can they demand bargaining on that?
No. The collective bargaining law, which is 150E of the Massachusetts General Laws, they have a list of subjects that are mandatory subjects of bargaining, and they have some that are non-mandatory. Doesn't mean you can't bargain them, but you can't demand to bargain them. And one of those is the manning levels. The only way to make a manning level an issue that has to be bargained is to reduce it to an ordinance, city ordinance. If it's in city ordinance and they try to change it, then you can file a demand, and you can file an unfair labor practice because they're changing something statutorily. But if you put it in a collective bargaining agreement, it's binding on both parties, as that agreement is, that instrument is. However, that instrument does come to an end, because by law, you can't have a collective bargaining agreement for more than 3 years in the state of Massachusetts under 150E. But they have what they call an evergreen clause, which basically states that the instrument will stay in full effect until replaced by a successor. So unless it's put into ordinance, if they try to change it at a later date, it's going to end up with some serious litigation, because the fact is that the city could take a position that says, okay, you're right, it's in the contract, we'll abide by this contract, but in order to get a new contract and to get a pay raise or whatever, you're going to have to give this up. We're going to have to reduce the number here because financially we can't afford it. And if the union says you can't change that because you've agreed to it, well, you've only agreed to it for the term of the collective bargaining agreement. It's technically not in memoriam for time forever, and so that is an issue. And actually, I brought that up to a few of the members, and maybe they're going to try to get it. I'm not sure if they will, if the mayor will go along with that. But realistically, it's kind of a promise that's kind of a typical political promise. It's kind of like the checks in the mail.
It's empty. It's empty. Yeah, and there isn't a city councilor out there that's willing to bring forth an ordinance or a resolution for an ordinance saying that the Fall River Fire Department shall have no less than 200 firefighters at any time. That's not going to happen. It wouldn't be feasible for them to do, or to work with the city on getting something like that done. So it's kind of scary to think that a promise is being made like that, and again, it's not even with a true negotiating body. It's just 2 people, 3 people.
Yeah, that's another aspect of the situation that is kind of in a gray area, and we discussed that on our other show.
Yeah.
But the fact is that even in in defense of the council, it's difficult to put those numbers in an ordinance because theoretically, those numbers could change. They could actually get smaller with some of the long-term changes that could be made with the department, reconfiguration of stations, so the running time's reduced, and you could actually probably get a number that would give you even better protection, with a few less. I don't think the department you could never see 153. It's just impossible to protect this city with that number. But if you went to 3 task forces, that number could go maybe slightly below 2. And once you put in an ordinance, before you put anything in ordinance, there has to be an exhaustive look at the department to make sure that there are no jobs that really we don't need in there, just like in any department, in any city. Before you're going to reduce every single job to ordinance, you have to ensure that every single job is necessary. And as it stands today in the city of Fall River, so that people will know, there are only 2 jobs in the Fall River Fire Department that are in ordinance. That is the fire chief's job and the administrative assistant to the fire chief.
So we know where we stand then, and that's a good thing. As the old cartoon show used to say, knowing's half the battle. It's just interesting to see, especially as you're talking about personnel and employees. We live in a city where we have all these people, especially in the school department, that are paid for out of grant money. And I even found that out in my interview with Michael Dion, that people are paid for with grant money. And that once that grant money is exhausted, we keep them on. We don't have the money, but we keep them on. So we have another mouth to feed, for the lack of a better expression. And the excuses I've been given are, well, we have to keep these people employed. It's just not right that once the grant ends, they're out of work. Well, you took the job knowing it was grant money, and you know the grant money is going to come to an end at some point, so you expect to stay on even after the grant money's gone? I mean, is this an unrealistic expectation to have?
Oh, absolutely. But you've got to realize that they had absolutely no qualms in saying he's going to lay off 60 firefighters because the grant dried up.
And that's exactly where I was going.
But we can't do that in the school department, because that giant vacuum cleaner that is our school department seems to do nothing but create more and more positions. And it's always, if it's a patronage position or an administrative position, it never goes away.
It's so sad that that's the way it is. And in talking about the school department and the buildings, I did a lot of research on these large megalithic schools that we have, because Fall River was following the pattern of West Coast schools, which dumped the pattern shortly after starting it. But Fall River, for some reason, didn't see that, because the huge megalithic schools actually have a huge reduction in success rates amongst the elementary school students. And even at the high school level, having schools that are so large like ours are not effective in teaching what these students need to know. But we'll still throw money into it. I mean, and this is how we show you the waste that keeps going on. It's wasteful over and over and over again. So what are we as citizens supposed to do?
Well, that's always a difficult thing, because we get this mantra that we're mandated to spend this money. We have to spend it. But the problem is, it's a catch-22, because we get into this cycle, as we talked about when we talked about CDA, that they begin to create these things that it becomes their primary function to get larger. They get rewarded for getting larger. It's like the federal government. It's like, if you look at the federal government, the way it operates, if you have any agency, if they run under budget, they get their budget cut. So what is what is the impetus there? It's like, we've got to spend every single, even if we have,
Right.
even if we misspend it, we have to spend it, because if we don't spend everything, they'll cut our budget. But if we spend every penny, they'll increase our budget. And this is what the school department has become. It's become this giant network of creating more and more patronage jobs, and we begin to redefine education And we feel that the more administration we have, the better the education. And now they're looking at putting in more teachers' assistants or whatever they call them now. But the paraprofessional teachers or whatever. But the fact is that, you know, if we eliminated half these other people that we had in this other tier, we could put in more teachers in every classroom. And the reality is that, as you said, CJ, when somebody takes a job and it's on a grant, they should fully realize that that grant may come to an end and they may lose it. They may lose the job. So that's the way it is. If you're hired as a Christmas temp at a store, you know that when the Christmas holidays are over, you're gone.
That's the way it works. That truly is the way it works. And but for some reason, it doesn't work that way. I mean, you look at, and you know, our key agency to look at is always the Fall River Office of Economic Disaster or Destruction or whatever you want to call it. And I asked a specific question on, well, how can you get rid of them? And the answer is, find somebody else who'll do the job and who can do it as well, if not better. So here's a challenge out to you. If you know somebody that thinks they can put together an agency or a company to compete with the Fall River Office of Economic Destruction, maybe you should do it and apply for the CDA money. You're just as eligible for it as anyone else. And maybe if, you know, CDA didn't get any money from if CDA found that they were giving money to somebody else who's producing, then the Fall River Office of Economic Destruction will not get any money, and therefore will do away with the headache known as Kenny Fiola and staff. But to say that we can't cut their budget that happened a couple of years ago of $100,000 and say, oh, we have to give that money back because 2 people are going to be out of work. You know, the city of Fall River is not an employment agency, and we have to stop existing that way. But I will give you some news that I've gotten pretty much almost confirmed that the pay-as-you-throw is going to happen. So you're going to be buying your bags at Stop and Shop or Shaw's.
You mean the pay-as-you-throw that the mayor said was off the table during the mayoral debates?
Yes, that.
Oh, okay, just checking.
Well, you know, the promises are still there. You know, he's holding to them. But from my understanding and from a few sources within City Hall, pay-as-you-throw, no matter what decision is made on how we're going to dispose of the trash, we are going to have to pay to dispose of it to offset the cost to the city. And again, payment for the service is on the back of the taxpayer, and now not only the taxpayer, but the non-taxpayer in the city, the renters.
You're right. And the catch-22 at the meeting today, Kathy Ann Veris, our city administrator, was going over some her numbers, and she said that with a full 2.5 increase on the tax rate, they're going to realize $2 million. That's what they're projecting. Only $2 million. And they're factoring in $1 million in growth, which I don't know how we're going to get $1 million in growth. But the fact is, see, this is the thing that bothers me. We talked in time and time again about how we're shrinking our tax base by getting people to move out, and yet this is what we have to work with. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot, everybody. So let's just...
All the time. All the time. We shoot ourselves in the foot. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again in our next show. Please remember, Mondays and Thursdays, 5 p.m., Channel 95.
Stay active.